technology group. And I, as I said earlier, help clients build, transform, and grow their businesses. With me, I have my very good friend Ramya from Loblaw. She's a senior data scientist there. Ramya, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
I just muted myself for a while, so
Go ahead.
no cacophony. so I'm a senior data scientist at Loblaw's Corporation Limited, um, and my interests outside of data science, I'm absolutely passionate about design thinking because of its sheer applicability. Um, and the way it touches the lives of people in different ways. And when it comes to artificial intelligence, probably um, I would want to associate myself with interpretability, natural language processing, and um, when it comes to extracurricular activities, I am like I love music, and I kind of try different workouts, try to stay active. So, those are some of my interests outside of professional and academic life. So, that's a short,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's a short story about me.
And we'll be diving into that, the exercise one a bit later today, spoiler alert, right? But before we do that, again, I just want to remind everybody we met last month and we talked about what is design thinking, what are the different aspects of it. In fact, I wrote a Medium post with a full session recording and Ramya slides and shared that as well. If you haven't had a chance to see it, just go ahead to the website, transform this, and follow the link. You will be able to see that afterwards. Today, we're going to actually make this very real conversation. And I say conversation because I want to make sure you guys participate. So use either chat or just unmute yourself and jump right in. That's kind of how we do things here. It's not just Ramya and I talking at you, it's a conversation very much with you. So while we're going through this material, jump in, ask a question, interact with us. So we're going to be going through a actual real life case study. So Ramya, before we dive in, should we do a bit of a recap from last time
Sure,
just to remind
sure,
everyone?
sure. Sure. So before I could, start with my presentation, just as previously I had shared an interesting anecdote, I would like to share another very interesting anecdotes, and this is related to the Sustainable Development Goals, and I'm going to talk about one of those use cases that was narrated by one of the donors, um, and this narrator in one of the TED talks talks about a farmer, a poor farmer, um, you know, reaching out to her and saying that you white privileged rich people do not understand us. And the donor is kind of shocked because since years they have been making tremendous contributions, financial contributions to their cause, and they've been sending money to um, West Africa, which has been
Mhm.
ravaged by some sort of wars, and there's serious humanitarian crisis there. And and she's actually working there in West Africa, and this farmer comes up to her and says, you don't understand us, quite frankly. And the donor is shocked because she does not have words to say further. So she then asks the farmer, okay, why do you say that um, we don't understand you? So the farmer says, do you think by giving us money, um, you are helping us? Because the typical perception of people in the West um, is that if you give them money,
Mhm.
you're empowering them. Um, in the sense that for a farmer, it translates to you give them money, you make them capable of growing crops. And in the process, they sell those crops, and then logically, of course, they're able to sustain a sort of uh, a cash flow into their lives, and that sustains them. And in the sense that they're able to sustain it, they're able to buy new seeds, and over the course of time, they're able to improve their lives. That's what we feel or think, right? But the farmer says, you know what we don't have? We don't have that security.
Hmm.
We cannot go and sell our produce in the markets because it's far away. And that's the main problem here. That's the main challenge. So when the donor decided to listen to the farmer, she has essentially kickstarted the process of design thinking. The first step, which is empathize. Empathize with the end user. And this example, it's beautiful, it's interesting in its own way, because previously we have been dealing with examples where our end users were typically customers.
Hmm.
They were you know probably using our applications, using our services. But here the end user is the beneficiary.
Right.
And what design thinking has done is enrich that relationship between a donor and the beneficiary, right? Because after this, they just needed 4 hours of discussion, with the help of which they were able to come up with a solution. And the solution was to to bring the source and the sink of the produce closer, right? So so that's how I want to see this process as, and I that's how I want everyone to see this process as. Design thinking has got very high levels of applicability. It's not just you know applicable to businesses, but think of it as a process of enriching the the education system that
Right.
we have.
Actually, Ramya, I would even go a little step further rather than call it a process. I would say bring authenticity into any work that you do, right? Whether it's, as you said, for a real life problem that's impacting people and keeping them in poverty.
Mhm.
Or if you bring it back to your companies, you're still working with your coworkers. And how do you make that experience much more authentic, much more collaborative, right?
Absolutely. And it also, at a very high level, if we look at this, even the people who create the policies for the common man, the governments. So the relationship between a government and the citizens, the constituents, the representatives and the constituents, how can that improve? It can improve when you are, in the first place, empathetic. You're able to exactly understand what they need. So I would say that it's a very, it's not, there's no sort of a boundary that you can draw. You cannot say that, just like agile or any other sort of you know terminologies that we use in software engineering. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because 2 days back, one of my friends came up to me and said, how is design thinking different from the agile framework that we talk
Right.
about?
Because
Right?
that's stuck in people's heads now, isn't it? It's like that dirty little word at the water cooler, which no one really truly understands. But everything iterative somehow seems like it's, touchy-feely type of stuff, somehow gets attached to that agile, capital A methodology, right? We're
Yes.
stuck in that mindset. Just understanding the Bible of agile and somehow applying it to our situation. It's like when you have a hammer, every problem is a nail, right?
Yeah, and I think it's the mainly the confusion rises, Gunjan. It's the iterative part of this entire exercise
Right.
makes it sound very similar to agile framework. But I asked him a question back. I said, okay, when you design your software, for example, software application, do you take the pains of going back and gauging the customer satisfaction levels?
Exactly. It's more about making it practical, right?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
more than that, Do you even think your application is required by your end user? Are you making applications for them,
Right.
as opposed to, the business objectives? You might have some business objectives and you're trying to,
Just
probably
meet them. Yeah.
accomplish them.
Yeah.
But then are you designing an application for your end user? And it's, and we have to think as, let's say people from the retail, when the customer enters your store, you even think about how the
Mhm.
experience is. Because I know by now people are trying to gauge the experience
Right.
of a customer online, the e-commerce platforms. But are we doing enough to understand how they interact with different sections of our store, and
Right.
how do they feel about it? Do
So
we even?
actually, you raise a really good point, right? So Usha actually was just putting things in the chat. Usha, I'm gonna say it out loud, and feel free to unmute yourself and jump in. So Usha said that she works in legal industry. So the reason I raise that, Ramya, is because as much as in retail, people are moving from that in-store, in-person model to more and more online, but the need to make it a consistent experience across the in-store versus online, because for some things I am going to go online,
Mhm.
some things I'm also going to go in person for. So similarly in legal, I imagine right now, and I don't work in that industry, so Usha may have to educate us, but I imagine that before there was a lot of in-person interaction with customers. And now with courts and a lot of these things moving online, I imagine what that experience is and how that's disrupting that entire experience. So Usha, would you have anything to add to that? Usha, are you able to unmute yourself or just respond in the chat? Oh, go ahead.
I necessarily don't understand technology that much, but I'm a keen observer of what Ramya says because um, she's been somebody who has been very passionate about AI and design thinking. So I necessarily cannot associate with the topic, but I just listen in because of all the passion she shows. With the legal industry, yes, it's moving online for us. It's a paper based industry,
Hmm.
it's a very traditional industry. We do not have that much interface with technology as much as other industries have.
Right.
But I'm just thinking because of the ongoing pandemic, we are seeing a lot of change. I took the bar exam online,
Hmm.
and the software, we saw a lot of interface with AI technology. So I think we are slowly moving towards embracing technology. And I would love to hear Ramya's insights on, um, how design thinking, AI could impact the legal industry.
Well, that's an interesting question, Usha, because when it comes to AI, of course, there are different streams of AI that can help you, like natural language processing, which is what I am passionate about.
Hmm.
Can do a lot of text analytics for you, and probably when you are, trying to associate different cases, when it comes to precedences, finding precedences from historical cases, you can you can use a lot of this natural language processing, some sort of knowledge graphs, so that you can find out the nearest case, a similar case in history, because I'm sure you would have loads of them to refer to when it comes to any case. But then, when you talk about design thinking, again, the design thinking here, it is like if you're able to effectively understand your clients, because it goes beyond the artificial intelligence and automating processes. It's
Hmm.
about basically understanding what your client wants. For example, um, what are the best ways of resolving certain problems. uh, Maybe some people want immediate redressal, And one example that I can think of is people don't have patience to wait for years for certain cases to be dealt with. They want immediate sort of redressal. So, what can you do from your end to minimize the time that it takes for a person to get justice? So, so again, that boils down to your understanding of what the client wants and what typically people probably from underprivileged sections of the society would want. How would they want to seek justice? So these are a couple of points that you could think of where, as an associate or as an attorney, how could you implement that?
Mhm.
So,
And
it was
I definitely relate to that too, Ramya. I almost see lawyers as consultants in some way, right? And the reason I say that is it's an interesting position. You're essentially supporting or representing your client in front of the justice system. So it's interesting. In some ways, you have your guardrails that are set by regulatory policies, whatever it is, rules, regulations. The law says so and so. And then there are some areas which are gray and not sure. And that's maybe where most of the cases fall in, right? That's why you're trying to figure out whether someone is in the right or the wrong or what's going on, which is
absolutely.
very similar to how consultants operate too, right? You're coming in to help solve a problem. If there already was a methodology that you could just take and step by step do this, or there was a tool that said, let me buy this and just let me go at it, then you wouldn't need them. So it's
Absolutely.
quite interesting how lawyers used to operate versus how a lot of the consultants that I've been talking to and how they used to operate, whether it's in person or at the client side before. And now you're forced to sort of do it remotely. How do you, first of all, think about design thinking from how you're going to bring these conversations together? What type of questions are you going to ask and when, right?
Exactly.
Because people think so much about their assumptions, constraints, and collecting that information that they forget to ask the right question at the right time, right? If there was a checklist, you could just send it to someone and that would be it. But to your earlier example, if you're asking for money and you're only asking me certain set of questions which actually don't cover my need and you're just saying just respond yes or no here, then
Yes.
you actually haven't really heard me, right? You maybe you've seen me talk because I just responded yes or no, but you actually haven't heard me.
Yeah, interesting. It's interesting as you spoke. And also when I heard Usha, I was thinking about uh, the legal domain in general. It has it has more to do with understanding your client,
Hmm.
and I think it would be a best place where we could actually implement the principles of design thinking,
Right.
because unless and until you understand your client whom you are going to represent, it would be very difficult
Absolutely.
for you to go ahead and make suitable arguments in favor of them, right?
Yeah.
So
And it's
uh,
not even about technology, right? It's even before you dive into technology, AI, and those
absolutely,
type of things. Figure
absolutely,
out through those the diagram we shared last time, which is on the right side of the slide, figuring
yes.
out what is it that are is going to help you relate to that client and empathize and define their needs, right?
Absolutely. And then, ideate is the process where you start thinking about, okay, how do I solve the problem
Right.
once I have defined it? So, let's say in the case of, lawyers and their clients, now it boils down to understanding, okay, what would be those suitable clauses that they could use,
Hmm.
from, let's say, the different penal codes or the legal doctrines that they have. I'm sorry,
But we're oversimplifying it, but yeah, we get.
exactly, exactly. So you ideate, and then in here the prototyping process is presenting those arguments in whatever you think. Probably you have a legal team and you come up with certain ideas, certain clauses, and in the prototyping stage you're actually creating a sort of a framework where you can share your list of clauses
Right.
that are applicable in this case with your end user, that's the client, and then you test. You test with your, like, did
Real
you
life
like
situations. Yeah.
exactly, exactly, and then you get back their feedback. And it's not like I know the list of clauses that I need to use and I directly go to the court and start arguing. No. So you're bringing in the client and saying that, these are the things that I'm going to present in the court. You discuss. And
Right.
once you discuss, you get their feedback. And then it's like, oh, maybe they want this as well. So I think my process of definition needs some sort of adjustment. I go back to the definition, the problem definition stage, and then I redefine everything, ideate again, and then prototype, discuss with my client. So it's again a form of design thinking, right? So you're constantly interacting
Yeah,
with your team, and you're just
absolutely.
improving the set of clauses and the arguments that you're going to present at the end.
Yeah, it's more like a problem solving framework for me, that brings you very close to the clients. So Ramya, I know that you actually had, we touched upon your passion for finding ways to stay active. And I know that you have prepared a very specific case study. So maybe we could dive into that if you don't mind a bit more.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So this case is a bit frivolous. I didn't want to touch on a more intense sort of topic here. So I wanted to bring in a fun element, kids, of course. So observing the kids. Um, I know the adolescents who are like crossed 12 years would not agree with me. They would not want to call themselves as kids, but for most of us, they're kids anyway. So kids from 5 to 17 years. And what we have observed is that it's again a process of empathizing, which is like observing people, basic observations. So the observation is that you see the kids, and they are also following us, adults, right? So they look at us, they've grown unhealthy because of their eating habits, and in a very, I would say that in a very natural way they want to not exercise that much. So they're it's clear that during lockdown there's lack of exercise, and then um, due to lack of exercise and unhealthy habits, they are from bundle of joy becoming real bundles of unhealthiness.
Hmm.
And we are like, where when we look at them, we feel, okay, we should be doing something, right? So creating, identifying, first process is identifying the problem, which is like
Right.
kids gaining weight.
So I just want to point out, Ramya, that even the problem definition itself requires perspective, and there's different perspectives, right? So there's the parent's perspective, because if I'm a parent and I'm sitting at home and I'm working, yes, I'm being bothered. I need to engage with the child because they're not at school hanging out with their friends, right? There's many different items there. But am I trying to solve the problem from the perspective of the child or the parent? Because there would be a difference in the end result based on that, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the first step, once you're done with the step, you need to, sort of conduct those studies, research, we call them as the research studies, where you exactly identify the groups of people who are affected by this.
The
And
stakeholders, so to speak.
absolutely. And also the people from whom you can take some sort of help. For example, doctors, the physicians, who can exactly tell you what you would need or the kids would need to get into shape, right? So you so you conduct those research studies to understand the kids. That's the main objective. So your objective is, okay, why are these kids growing fat? And then understanding, why are they falling into the weird eating patterns?
Hmm.
the weird, and why are they not exercising? What is demotivating them, right? And preventing them from exercising. So, in a way, you're trying to understand your end user, and that is your research objective. So, coming out with clear research objectives, coming up with the groups of people who would be affected by the problem in hand, right? So, once you have identified that the major groups of people would be, the parents, you need to involve the parents in the study, because you know kids are kids after all, so you cannot ask all your questions from your end users.
Right.
So
I think it's one of those things, right? Sometimes your end user is a little bit of an indirect reach, right? So you're not gonna, to your point, it's probably not ethical, I would say, to market something directly to a kid, right?
absolutely.
Even though it happens today, you watch an ad on TV and kids go, "Oh, I want that toy, or I want this and that, or that chocolate." But how much of that is ethical? How much of that is actually good for them versus just showing them a shiny object that they're going to want? The decision maker here is actually the parent, right?
Yeah, and also that you would find that a kid would not be able to give you a complete picture. And this is one of the things that they say in design thinking. Don't just target the person whom you really want to create the application for. You should also understand that there are other. It's a continuous thing, right? It's
Yeah,
not
it's an
this.
ecosystem. Yeah,
It's an ecosystem,
right.
exactly. And who are the other players or actors in that ecosystem? We need to understand them, and we need to include them. So here you have, of course, the kids, but also the parents to understand. Okay, so what is that typical? For example, if you want to understand what is the best way of providing information to the kids,
Hmm.
and if you want to understand that, so, would it be in the form of an ad campaign in the television, or are children, do they read? Are they voracious readers? Or would they prefer other forms of electronic media, such as iPhones, iPads?
Hmm.
And then, your parents would, the parents would make you realize that, yes, they are like stuck to the iPads and the iPhones of the world. So you need to, so typically this solution should be an app, an application. That's how you develop that understanding. Okay, based on your user study and your, the way people have um, probably responded to your questionnaires, because you would, after you have your research objectives in mind, you would have a set of questions for each of those groups: the kids, the
Right.
parents, and the
Y-
doctor. Right?
You know what, Ramya? I'm reminding. I was just scrolling through LinkedIn when I woke up this morning, and I don't know how many of you have heard of Adam Grant. He is, I think he calls himself the organizational psychologist, right? So people are used to that term psychologist in a personal sense, right? If I'm struggling with something or if I need help from a mental wellness perspective, I'll go talk to a psychologist. But he represents himself as an organizational psychologist.
Mhm.
And I love his stuff. So a very simple post he had this morning, which reminded me, based on your story, he said when a pessimistic person looks at half a glass, he says, well, glass is half empty, right? Optimistic person looks at it and goes, well, the glass is half full.
Absolutely.
A proactive person looks at it and go, you know what? While you were trying to figure out what term to put here, I actually went ahead and filled the glass all the way to the top, so it's fully full. So
Yes.
that helped me realize it's a different perspective that these people can bring in, and even when we're forming these questions,
Mhm.
sometimes it just needs to be more of a conversation, just like we were having today, right? Ramya and I got here with the intent of sharing this study with you, but then Usha had a question about legal pieces, and it was such an interesting conversation for us to have because it touches upon all the different aspects of design thinking, right? So it's
True.
not just to say, let's stick to this one topic and just answer this question one way, but having that perspective, that psychologist point of view to say, let me take a step back, look at it from all different angles. And even if the person wants to go a little bit beyond where my questions are right now, because even beyond the ecosystems, there might be other items or, education, for example. It impacts kids just as much as exercise does. So you need to take that into account as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because, another thing that comes to my mind is when you're dealing with users, your kids, what is the best way of even persuading them to do something? Like, I could design an app where there could be a sort of a voice telling them, in a very banal way, okay, you should exercise, or you should eat this or that, you should avoid these foods. But will they be receptive? As in, would they take that piece of information and actually turn them into something actionable?
Hmm.
So how do you persuade them, in the sense, how do you help them or guide them in such a way that they are receptive to your instructions? What is the best way of delivering the instructions to them and
Right.
they feel motivated? So
Absolutely. And this is where Ramya, Mario just reminded us, for speaking of Adam Grant,
mhm,
one of his book is Givers Over Takers, right? So that if you're always just asking for information, then you're kind of a taker, right? You need to be seen as a giver to be able to relate to them, especially with
beautiful,
kids, I would
beautiful.
say.
Yeah, it's very beautiful what Mario said, because it's very powerful. Because we have it's not just designing those research objectives and then the questionnaires and getting information, but doing something to bring those whatever you've learned from those questionnaires, by examining the answers to those questions. What have you learned as a typical, let's say, application developer? What
Right.
have you learned? So that's it's like, it's brilliant what Mario said, because it's like, as a developer, as a person who's trying to solve something, you also have to you have to absolutely make sure that you're able to embrace all those things that you learned during the process. And how and what is that typical stage where you start learning about your users? It's this defined stage where you are exactly asking the right questions.
Right.
And there's one very important thing related to the type of questions that you need to answer, that you need to ask, I'm sorry. So your questions should be open ended, in the sense that they should not be you know influencing your end user. You want to capture exactly the ideas that they have in mind. So that's a very interesting challenge, I would say, during the definition stage, where
Right.
you're exactly framing those questions in a way that you're not thrusting your opinion or your I would say internal biases into this process.
Right. And it's, to be honest, I'm reminded of Steve Jobs, Ramya, when you say that. Because on one hand, he used to say, yeah, yeah, just create it and users will come. But people don't realize he almost had a sixth sense because he was always observing, if I put out a previous product, how are people using it? How are they living and breathing with it? What do they wish they had? What are they actually saying? That's the part that's not visible. So people get hung up on that statement, yeah, build and they'll come. But you build it in such a way that it actually includes their feedback from the last round. That's why they would come.
Yeah, and the simple process, I would tell you, instead of starting with a do
Right.
you feel? Instead of starting those questions with do you feel, start it with how do you feel?
Right.
It's like using how, what, as opposed to do, and all those things that probably would reinforce your internal biases on your end user. So that's a very interesting thing, because that's when the solution that you're delivering would be truly received by the users, because it's made for them. So
Right.
That's the most important thing. And once, an interesting thing is that once you have the answers in front of you, um, the most important thing is to come up with those user personas. So in this case, you're talking about different personas of kids that you're going to handle. And by that, I would say the personas, depending upon their eating habits, their activity levels, there'll be certain kids who are from the beginning conscious about how much they eat and how they look, whereby they take care of themselves, right? But there are certain kids who are like, who are as lackadaisical as their, what do you call it, the adult counterparts, like taking things for granted. It's like, okay, I don't have to worry about my weight now, probably I would reduce it once things become normal. Maybe after COVID-19, I would start exercising and miraculously I would lose 100 pounds. And
No,
so
that's never going to happen.
that's not going to happen. So you have these different personas of kids, and you start, mapping out what is that majority persona that you have,
Right.
because usually you cannot make an application for everyone.
Right.
That's not possible. That's not humanly possible. But you try to find out what is that persona which could represent most of the kids in your, you know,
Yeah, and your target market, right? So that's actually one thing that I want to point out, Ramya, there, because I would often see people when they're at that stage, they'll, to your point, choose the most voluminous, the biggest persona, right? The one that represents most amount of users. But personally, I would actually, if I was a business creating this app, I would actually choose the one that has the most um, longevity to it. And what I mean by that is the people who are continued users. Because if
yeah.
you're creating population that is going to, let's say initially they download it, but then they don't use it, that's
Mhm.
not really a repeat customer, is it? You need the most amount of repeat customers.
Absolutely. So, in this process, and all that information, Gunjan, you can get it by analyzing the answers,
Right.
the way the way people have answered your questions, whether they are just doing it for fun. What is the level of, you can say, conviction?
Engagement or conviction, yeah.
So, how convinced are they that they need to take some action from their end, right? So of course it's difficult for us to gauge that in kids, but that's where we have the parents and the doctors to help you, right? So how do we, what do we do to make them follow this regimen, and how do we kind of even make them stay motivated, right? So we want them to stay motivated, take those really important actions when it's required, so to speak. So
Right.
once you have the majority persona, you understand that most of the kids fall within this particular bucket. Give it a name, a fancy name, probably Jeremy, or Emily, or you could give that persona some name, and then after that start forming a sort of a multidisciplinary team.
Right.
So I would say that one of the mistakes that most of the companies commit is when they have over representation from a certain group of people. For
Hmm.
example, when they're brainstorming, they would include only the developers, or maybe it would be highly skewed towards the front end people or the back end people. So instead of, and it could be even that you would have very less representation from the business teams, but it's more of let's say the technical folks. So usually these brainstorming sessions are restricted to technical folks, but I would say I would encourage them, since if you look at the nature of this application, it's very general, right? So I would say that you could have people from different backgrounds, from psychology, you know, or you could bring in some ethicist, you could bring people from the legal field. And what you need to understand is that in design thinking, and this is where it's different from the agile frameworks of the world, you are talking about human beings. So we should stop thinking about our customers as just a mere entities, right? They are
Mhm.
not like, we don't attach emotions because we don't think of them as human beings. And that's where design thinking is gonna, you know it's gonna come back to you and say, no, you're supposed to look at them as human beings. And
Yeah.
here in this process, once you have, and even your questionnaires, when it boils down to designing your questionnaires, you have to think of your kids, your parents, your doctors as humans, and
Right.
your questions should be according to that.
In fact, you
So
raise a good point, Ramya, because one of the things we forget, especially in technology field, right, when you bring it to that point, when you're designing or developing solutions, our customers or whoever the end client there is becomes a spreadsheet or a Word document. And it's as if it's not going to change, right? But if we think of them as a human being, we know that there will be certain things on that persona that may be living and breathing because their needs, especially right now, there's so much unpredictability, right? You and I are in Toronto. We were talking about that before the event. We're sort of back in wave three. I know government isn't calling it that, but they're calling it red, right?
mm,
That means wave three essentially at the moment. So our needs are changing, maybe taking a step back. Maybe some of them have evolved from that stage two, wave two, whatever you want to call it. So thinking about it from that perspective and understanding what is actually driving the changes in those behaviors will
mhm,
actually help you at this step, because then you can say, okay, even if something changes later on this particular piece, here's
mhm.
how could I could possibly adjust it, right?
Yes, yes. And it's just the, I would say that when you talk about human beings, like, another thing that comes to my mind is the specific KPIs that we measure,
Mhm.
right? So when we are designing the applications, usually, for example, it would be click through rate or conversion rate or something
Right.
of that
Very
sort.
technical stuff, yeah.
Very technical stuff. But are we talking about engagement? Are we talking about satisfaction?
Right.
Is customer satisfaction same as customer engagement? Like, can I say that they're like, I can just replace um, one of them? It's like, um,
Like synonyms almost, or are
yeah,
they two
synonyms,
different
synonyms.
things? Yeah.
Exactly. So they're not very different. They're the same. They're synonyms. So thank you for, I just lost the word.
No, no worries about that's why I'm here.
so so these are like, are we including those KPIs that measure customer satisfaction? And
Hmm.
are we doing that? So, or in general, the end users, how are we gauging our end users?
Right.
So, so that's important. And the process of ideate would lead to the specific ideas that you need to come up with, or the specific principles that your applications, or features, so to speak, that your application should have. For example, if you want to warn the kid that, okay, this particular food is bad for you, don't have it, probably you can use some sort of color coding, because humans in general are receptive to colors, right? So
Hmm.
instead of complicating it and typing something in words, probably, because you're talking about small kids, 5 years, look at the range, 5 to 17. So they're more receptive to colors, right? So you'll probably color code your food. Okay, red means no, don't go near it, and orange is, orange or amber probably means, okay, probably you can indulge in this, but be careful, when it comes to the quantities.
Yeah.
And green, absolutely, it's just go for it, right?
So it's
So
another thing, Ramya. based on the cultural perspective, though, colors may have different meaning, right? So you and I were chatting about this earlier. In our
Mhm.
culture during Diwali, we don't like to wear black, right? We like to wear very colorful, very bright outfits, right? That's where all those langas and things come from that people see in the movies. But
True.
then in certain other culture, during certain times, certain colors may have different meanings. So to your earlier point, as much as during the development time frame, you want to have those different perspectives and different roles from the organization represented. You also want to make sure that you don't lump your personas for kids in one bucket, right? Because from a
Absolutely.
AI data point of view, which you know more about than I do at this point, yeah.
I think it's also Gunjan, when it comes to color coding, once we have understood that it's like the visual perception is important, maybe associate that with the traffic signal, it's
Right.
like the red means stop, amber means ready, and, you know, green
Green means
actually
go.
ahead. So it's something like associating these
Yeah.
things with day to day, the things that we use in real life, which is like, the traffic signals. So the color codes and the traffic signals go together. So, being innovative, of course, you need to depend on your users as well, but then you need to be creative from your end. It's like, what sort of a scheme should I be using? More generalized approach. Let me fall back to my traffic signals, because I have also seen that in let's say the the small kids, probably aged 3 and 4, the effective way of teaching them something is to bring in these examples from the real world. And traffic signal is one example that I could come up with, Gunjan. Um, so once, okay, now going back to this presentation, okay, so you have ideated and you've come up with those ideas that you have to come up with. Another example would be, let's say that your who should be talking to you or interacting with you in
Hmm.
that app. So who would be giving you instructions? Should it be, a person who's your superhero? Let's say that
Right.
kids say that, oh, we want our superheroes to come and tell us what to do, right? So, so who is your superhero? Is it your father, or it's a mother, or is it some person who is like, you know, who looks like probably Spider-Man, or, Batman or Superman? So, so typically, who would you want to interact with in that application? So once you're clear with those principles, like use color code, use this superhero for delivering your instructions to your kids, right? And what are the times do you need to probably give them those particular signals in the morning or
Right.
information in the morning? You in the morning you tell them, okay, stick with this diet, or probably as the time progresses during the day you need to interact with them. So how do you need to interact? What are the typical times when you need to interact with your kids, right? And then once that's done, you create your wireframe, which is like, the initial prototype.
Right.
um,
The
my
look and feel, right? All the
exactly
how
exactly
things happen. Yeah.
My software friends will tell me it's called MVP, Ramya. So okay, so,
Right.
so creating those minimal viable product in the form of wireframes, and finally you go to the last stage where you test it with your end users, your kids. So how are they receiving that information, or is the medium that you have created for them, is it effective? How effective is it? And based on your the way they have interacted, it could be, you could directly ask them questions, or you can ask their parents questions. Are they even following what's being told to them? And what is their genuine perception about the application, right? So there are direct ways, there are indirect ways again. And that's another topic that we could discuss sometime, because I see that
Yeah.
it's 12:52. So
No,
So
we have a few more minutes. So this is where, Ramya, I wanted to touch upon the roles and responsibilities a bit more, right? So let's say that you and I are creating this app.
mhm,
So I can, based on the discussion today, even picture how this would work in my head, right? Like maybe it's just the personality that I have, but I'm piecing all this information together and going, okay, so parents have certain level of control because they are the ones defining what time, for example, the kid has breakfast, right?
mhm,
So
mhm,
maybe if they're trying to influence this kid, because they can't be everywhere right now. Maybe I'm a parent, I'm in a meeting at 8 a.m. The kid needs to have their breakfast. They're 7, 8 years old. They can
mhm,
potentially open the cupboard and take what they need to eat. I just need to somehow influence that they grab the right thing, an apple, let's say, as opposed to a sugary cereal, right?
yes,
So to your point earlier, an example was maybe I give them the iPhone or whatever it is, which they will have anyway, and it brings up Wonder Woman or whatever it is that they like, and she comes up and she says, hey Katie so and so, whatever the name is, and let's have an apple today because I feel like an apple will give me energy to later go and do so and so other things, right? So you're kind of informing the next step. You're showing the vision to the child, but you're still providing that level of supervision. I don't want to call it control, it's supervision to the parent, right? Because they've set it up this way. So
mhm.
now the follow through has to happen through the app by making it as exciting as possible. And that's part of the challenge here, right? So far, am I on the right track? That's kind of what we've been discussing, right?
Absolutely. Another role of the parent is to see those changes happen in the kid, right?
Right.
So they're once they've started following a certain regimen, is it kind of changing them? Is it changing their
Right.
eating habits? Is it influencing them into
The
doing some?
results. Yeah.
Exactly. The results, are they visible? And that's exactly why when you're testing, you don't really have to just ask questions from the kids, but you need to also include the other stakeholders, the doctors. Of course, the doctors would be in a position to tell you that, okay, this time when I saw the kid, there was a huge difference. And I could see that the kid that was looking like a bundle of unhealthiness is now looking much better because I can see it. And also those the health statistics would say that, okay,
Right.
health parameters would say that. Of course, they can back it up with that.
Right. So
So
that's the life cycle of what you are developing and how, excuse me, continue to have design thinking there, right? But one of the challenges that if I go and talk to, let's say, even a small, medium, or a large company that may be developing this, the tripping point almost seems to be how do I even get to the testing point? Who does what when? And especially in larger organization where roles are defined already, how do you propose they think about design thinking as a first step? So let's say this app is a pilot and I'm a very waterfall or even an agile type organization.
mhm.
How should I convince my team to think this way?
So the thing is that, so it's the role. I would say that every project in general has identified the project lead or the program manager, right? And essentially, it is the role of the program manager to distribute work, right, in the team. And I would say that design thinking actually starts at a very high level when you as an organization see something. So
Hmm.
it's, and then you start assigning specific resources to deal with. And I would say the development teams would come into picture only during the ideate phase. But the empathize and the define, if you've looked at the description and if you look at the slide, you would be like, there is this uh, product analysis and the need to understand the users. So I would say that that's a different team that could handle, and it's not typically your product development or the program manager sort of a a team that
Yeah,
would
not
be.
a delivery team, right? So that's something I almost find there's no one right or wrong answer, right, Ramya? It depends on the type of organization. But
Yeah.
one thing, at least in my experience, and I know we only have a few minutes, but it'd be great to hear some thoughts on this. How do people, what are the commonalities essentially, right, across various industries, across various different sizes of organizations? For me, it's the small team, right? Without the boundaries of this is what I do, this is what you do, because that's where you get into that my thing versus your thing. It needs to be a very free flowing type of team. Because remember the type of conversation we were having at the start when we first dove into your case, right? Empathize, define, and even as we were discussing those legal industry type challenges, it was a very fluid conversation. At one point, we talked about the customers. At another point, we talked about what are the rules, regulations, and law specific items that maybe somebody else would know. Not one person can know everything, right?
Mhm, mhm. I would say, Gunjan, that it's a mindset.
Right,
So, and also, there is, as you said, there is no right or wrong answer for anything right now. But the moment you realize the power of design thinking, you change your mindset. So instead of, I would say, it's a very beautiful thing that, David Kelly was talking about, who's actually the person who's written a lot about design thinking, is that the problems, usually the problems would, you would, someone would thrust the problem on you, and it's not the end user. It's someone, from your business team would say that, I think this is the problem what customers have,
right,
and you need to solve that problem, instead of, you know changing your mindset and directly interacting with the customers and trying to find out what their problem is. Again, it connects back to my example, where the farmer was so frustrated that he came and said, you don't know me,
right,
and you can't, if you don't know me, you can't solve my problem. So if you don't know my customer, and if you don't have dedicated resources in your organization that observe, you don't invest on observing people and making those key, taking those particular observations and taking some action on it finally, unless and until you change your mindset
right.
and give it towards design thinking, it's very difficult. So there's no right and wrong answer for this, Gunjan. But I would say that first step is to to start rethinking and recalibrating our strategies.
Right.
Thinking
Agreed.
about, yeah.
Yeah, customer focused, right? As opposed to, and then sticking with that customer focus. It's not a one-time thing either. If there are changes in that, we need to update that persona, right? We're not going to just hang on to what we had 2 months ago.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I know we're at time. Are there any other questions, comments for Ramya, or any suggestions that you would like us to cover next time around? Or even any feedback from this session, we would appreciate that as well. I think our audience is just being very shy. Well, oh, I think I see one comment coming by. Using design thinking for predicting behavior. Yes, for sure. Mario, would you like to expand on that?
Hello.
Hi, Mario.
Mm.
Hi. Yeah, no, right now I'm reading this book from Denise Schul, I think is the name,
Mhm.
and it's the psychology of trading, right? And
Mhm.
she makes a case that when it comes to trading, right, the stock market and all of that, financing and investment, right, that the most important thing is not knowing your numbers, but knowing human nature. So
Mhm.
that way, yeah, because I mean, basically, what you need to know is how people are going to react in the future. Yeah, that's what gives value to whatever you buy and sell today, right? So I
Yes.
was thinking that maybe we can use design thinking for yeah, developing our capabilities to predict behavior, and that, you know, that would be good also for you know, policy advice, for instance. You know, if you
Yeah.
can, if you can see in advance, you know, how an entire, you know, group or society is going to react, right? You can you know, take measures
You know,
prior to.
Mario, you're making me think of, I know it's like old news now, but Donald Trump, in
Yes.
some ways, he does it so well, doesn't he? He can make you jump, and you would ask, how high should I jump? Because people react either very positively or very negatively. There's no middle ground to anything he says, right? So in some ways, it's by design, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, and by not knowing, yeah, exactly, and by not, yeah,
Yeah,
true, and by
because
not preventing.
exactly, right? So it's on purpose. It's sort of like a reality TV show, right? From that point of view. So it's all been last 4 years for those that live in US, probably in education and design thinking in some ways, to your point, because it's been all about how to present information to certain groups of people, knowing how they would react to it, right? It's all about behaviors. I absolutely
Yes.
agree with you there. Yeah. Ramya, any thoughts
You,
from your side?
I would like to add this. It's like the power of information. So I see it as the how do you channelize this power of information, right? So you can channelize it for really good purposes, the
Right.
things that we have discussed about, or you could even start channelizing it for um, something that might sound or be unethical or
Mm-hmm.
be wrong, right? So it's like the knife, a knife can be used to stab someone, but the knife can also be used to cut vegetables. So in the same way, it's is the power. How are you channelizing that power? And design thinking, the principles of design thinking give you immense power to do something. That's what I believe in, and that's why I was fascinated by this. And the thing is that how do you channelize this this power that you have got, the power of information, right?
Right. The power
So
of data, right, as they say.
yes.
Because even during COVID, so many dashboards pass by our faces, but how that data was represented, the underlying data, it might have been actually the same, right? Same data set. But how you spin that really depends on, as Mario said, right, Ramya,
Yeah,
looking at how people will react to it, how they would
yeah,
like to see it.
yeah.
It's a really, really good point. And thank you for sharing that book with us, Mario. I'm definitely going to search for it as soon as we're done with this session. And you've got me intrigued.
Yeah. Yes, interesting.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I know we're a bit over time now. Thank you so much for sharing your Saturday with us. And those of you who are celebrating Diwali, thank you so much. Happy Diwali to you. Happy Diwali, Ramya, to you as well. And those of you who are health conscious, just go and take a look at World Diabetes Day. And I hope that it'll inspire you to support the community in some way as well.
Yeah. Thank you for being part of this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening. Have a good day. Have a good night. Take care. Bye.